This is episode number 139 of the Mixology Talk podcast, and this week we're talking to Ozeal Debastos about private event bartending, and he's going to give us some tips and share some of his expertise in the matter. Now, this is a question that we get asked a lot, so I'm really excited to talk to an expert. So if you've ever been interested in learning how to do private event bartending, kind of going out on your own, or if you're kind of getting into private event bartending, there's a lot of great advice he offers for us. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Mixology Talk podcast. I have a special guest here today that I'm super excited about, a friend of mine and a amazing private event bartender. So thanks for joining us, Ozeal. I definitely appreciate it, man.
Chris, my man, it's so great to be a part of your A Bar Above podcast. We were talking off air how I salute you, my friend, for holding it down for the bartending community and providing a community of bartenders with so much value. So hats off to you, man. It's an honor to be here.
Definitely appreciate it. And if anybody recognizes the sexy voice that is Ozeal,
barabove.com.
He does the intro to Bartender Journey as well, and he has his own podcast.
Right.
Was it No Permission Needed, right?
Correct.
Perfect. And and on that podcast, you talk mostly about online business and kind of the creative art side of being an entrepreneur. Am I correct?
Yeah, I like to say it's one part self-development, one part entrepreneurship. See what I did there?
I like it.
So yeah, it's
definitely quarter ounce pour of.
That's right. There you go. Yeah, it's definitely all about self-development, and we mix up helping people take their idea and turn it into a business. So I bring on a lot of entrepreneurs on the podcast and people in the self-development world, talk about the mindset, and it's just a fun podcast. And over 100 episodes. You know, it's a lot of work, but it's been a lot of fun being able to get these interviews out and help people in their own journey. So yeah.
And it was amazing. I did a series on entrepreneurship and bars and stuff, like people transitioning into making their own business. And it's amazing kind of the similarities that you continuously hear from people of, you know, kind of getting through the fear and the doubt that's involved and kind of getting past all that stuff to do it. So definitely, you know, kudos to you and doing what you do over there. I'm sure a lot of people hopefully start their own businesses and kind of get the entrepreneurship bug.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun.
Cool. So the reason we have Ozeal on the podcast is talk about private event bartending. It's something that I have a little bit of experience with, but he has done quite a few of them, and who better to talk to about private event space than Ozeal. So would you mind kind of telling us how you got started in private event bartending? Like what kind of got you into that?
Yeah, it was over 6 years ago, Chris. I was in the industry, and then at that time I was working a corporate event. Actually, I was working corporate. I was working a cubicle job. It was just a horrendous job that I was working. And I was really just tired of it. I wanted to get away from the industry, try something different. And I was there, and a friend of mine was two buddies of mine. A friend of mine who was, we used to be in the band circuit and the music circuit here in Houston. He and his cousins started a mobile bartending company and said, "Hey, I know you bartend. We started a bartending company. Would you be interested in doing private event bartending?" And I was like, "Private event bartending?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" So I did, I got booked. My first event was a Christmas house party.
Nice.
And it was so much fun. I, as a matter of fact, Chris, I was so nervous. I remember going back. I was so nervous. I was like, wait a minute, I know how to bartend. Why am I so nervous? But it was a different dynamic with private event bartending. It definitely is private. It's very intimate. So I just felt really awkward being in somebody's home. Didn't know how to feel. I remember shaking my first cocktail, which was a margarita. And I remember my hands, I was pouring it. I was shaking, bro. I was like, oh my God, what's going on with me, man? I need to calm down. So I took a step back, took a deep breath, and it was like, all right, just do what you do. It's yes, nervous, get in that, mindset. And so, yeah, that was my Christmas first party, first bartending event. And, I loved it. After I walked away, it was so much fun. It was great money. And I was like, I got home. by 12 o'clock, I think. And I was like, I can do this. I can do that. I can bartend and be home, not be out, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I kind of dig this. And so, yeah, that was my first event. And after that, I've been bartending over, I think roughly about 6 years now.
Oh, wow.
And then just really, really enjoy it. And I was doing it part-time with the corporate job until I left, and I just started doing it full-time. Through private bartending, Chris, I was able to pay over $16,000 in a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. So the money was, bro, it was a lot of sacrifice, a lot of ramen noodles, but I did it, and it was all funneled through private bartending. So,
wow.
Well,
congratulations, man. That's no small feat. That's a lot of money.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess my follow-up question to that was what kept you in the business for as long as you were, but it's pretty clear financially it just...
Yeah, I mean, just, the money, the hours, the social interaction that you get through private event bartending. It's a lot of fun, not to mention there's a lot of nice perks. I mean, you're doing these events where the host is always hooking you up with free food and it's just, free cake. And there's a lot of real cool perks to it. And of course, the networking aspect of it as well. So that's what really kept me, Chris, was the fact that, there was a lot of things that I really enjoyed about it. I mean, I love bartending and I love people. And if you like those two things, private event bartending is definitely a way to go because it's the best of both worlds. You know how it is, Chris, when you're behind the bar, it's kind of getting them out and they're off, With this one, people usually like to socialize a little bit and hang out at the bar. So that's something that really kept me in the private event bartending and still, today I still, get in behind the bar and still private event bartend myself. So.
Yeah, no, that's nice.
Game, man.
Yeah, well, and you helped me out quite a bit. I remember about a year ago, I was getting back into private event bartending and kind of rusty after a couple of years. And I shot you out a question and, we kind of talked a little bit about it. So you've been an invaluable resource for me as well. So definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So I think with this podcast in general, specifically actually, we're going to ask a lot of questions because I know there's a lot of questions we get asked about this specific subject, either through our podcast or the blog, but also recently on our Facebook group, which Ozeal's a part of. So there was a ton of questions, and I kind of want to make this as actionable as possible for people that are interested in kind of going this route. And so we'll just kind of get right into it.
Let's jump in. And real quick, big shout out, Chris, to the craft bartender community, which is an amazing community, super engaged.
Yeah.
People are just asking questions. I know when Julia posted that question, I mean, people just unloaded with their questions. So shout out to everybody in that community. Great mix of bartenders from all different levels, from all over the world.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. You guys are doing a great job there.
Thank you. Yeah. And if anybody's interested in joining, definitely check out mixologytalk.com/group, and I'll redirect you over to the Facebook group. And as Ozeal said, I'm super surprised how engaged everyone is and how freely information kind of flows across the group and how supportive everyone is. It's kind of a rare thing. So we definitely appreciate and know how lucky we are. And thanks to everybody in that group as well. But yeah, so tons of questions. And so I guess we'll just kind of go right through the list.
Jump into it, man. Let's do it.
So I think the number one question that we get asked all the time is how to get your first job. Like, you're a bartender, you're tending bar. How does that usually work?
There's a couple ways. Actually, there's a few ways. When I first started, I was helping somebody get into the business, and they got their first gig through Craigslist. You can go to the Craigslist section, and you can go to, I think it's the events section or services. And I helped them craft a nice email or a nice post. And they just say, hey, listen, if you're looking for a bartender for your next birthday party, wedding, and within 48 hours, Chris, he was booked 3 gigs.
Wow.
Yeah, man. So Craigslist, and then do a Google search. Usually there's a mobile bartending company in every city. And that's how I got started. My buddies had a mobile bartending company. And and it's just a great, just reach out to them. They're always looking for bartenders, especially when it comes to like seasonal work. November, especially around this time, a lot of corporate parties, a lot of Christmas parties. And of course, in the beginning of the year is always a hot spot to reach out to mobile bartending companies.
Sure.
So those are kind of the two major ways to kind of get into the business is search for mobile bartending companies, reach out to them. Also, there's a lot of independent catering companies, wedding venues that are also looking for people on staff. So that's also a great way to kind of get in. And then, of course, the old school route, just posting something on Craigslist and even using, social media to say, hey guys, if you have some bartending experience, if you know of someone who has a birthday party or wedding, I'm a bartender for hire, would be happy to help out. Something like that also helps out as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Definitely. I mean, in the Craigslist, I believe that's free, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's free.
There's literally no barrier to entry as far as getting your first clients through there. So that's great advice.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. And second question is, how much do you charge?
That's
actually the reason I asked you.
I talked about it.
Right, yeah.
So that's a tricky one because here's the deal. A lot of the times people are really, they don't know what to pay when it comes to a freelance bartender. It can start anywhere from $20 an hour. That's kind of the basic entry level, anywhere to, $100 an hour. It all depends on what the bar looks like.
Sure.
So there's basic bar setup, which is kind of simple highball drinks, and those, Jack and Cokes, et cetera, vodka tonic. And those are the ones that are really simple, but those could charge anywhere. You can start at 20, but you can also, 45 to 50 an hour.
Sure.
And that's, again, you can just say, hey, listen, this is going to be for setup, service, and then breakdown and cleanup. And you can kind of do an overall package. But if you want to talk about hourly rate, it starts anywhere from 20 an hour to 100. Usually when you get to like 50, 55, people will kind of resist because normally the clients are responsible for buying the liquor.
Right.
There's different laws in different states, of course. I know here in Texas, you need a liquor license to be able to purchase alcohol and sell it. It's TABC over here. So you have to be very careful. So the fact that they're purchasing the liquor, you're just being hired for the service. So sometimes they really don't like to pay over, 50 an hour. But that's kind of the sweet spot. But 50, between 50, 60. So if you're starting off, play with it, $20, you'll definitely get hired right away.
Sure.
That kind of price range. And it's still good because you're talking about $20, $25 an hour and tips. So you're walking away sometimes with, $200, $300, $400. Sometimes even for a 4-hour gig, which is usually the minimum.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll definitely talk about tips in a second here. But I would imagine this also kind of really depends on your location too.
Right.
So like New York, you could probably charge a little bit more, or LA or San Francisco in these major metropolitan areas versus something like a small town somewhere. Right. But I think this is, like I said, the one thing that you really, really helped me out with was what to charge and kind of going from there. Now, the other thing is, how do you estimate how much like product to bring, like your product mix? I assume this is kind of different depending on the different type of event that you're doing, but like, how do you kind of just wrap your head around what to buy or what to bring and what to ask for?
Right. So every single time I take on a beverage consultation, which I always offer, if you're getting into this business, you offer a beverage consultation with your clients and you let them, they always want to ask how much to buy, how much, mix, how much should I get with the mixers and the spirits and so on. So one of the things that it's always tricky, Chris, because it depends on the drinking crowd. So sometimes it's a light drinking crowd, moderate or heavy. And I'll ask them, say, how would you quantify your group? Is it a moderate drinking crowd? Is it a heavy drinking crowd? And then from there, you can kind of decide. It's always a hit and miss. I've learned that usually I go with the 1.75, the handle bottles. If it's like about 100 people, you can go to 3 or 4 is usually kind of the minimum. But that comes with practice, Chris. So anybody who is interested, that's something that you just have to learn. Usually, again, that's kind of more as more bang for the buck when you get the 1.75 liter bottles.
Sure.
You get about 3 or 4 of those. But again, it just comes with practice. There's not like a standard because every party is different, as you said, as you mentioned, depending on weddings and so on.
Right.
But yeah, it's a tricky question because you never know how to gauge it.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I've always kind of struggled with a little bit. I imagine it's always better to overbuy slightly than to underbuy because you don't want to dry bar it. Like,
especially with ice, man. Ice is the big one. Yeah.
We'll talk about that here in a second too, because, but if you overbuy, they're going to have leftovers. So that's always a good thing. You want to be responsible with that. But the way I usually did mine, and this is, very, very different, but I kind of take the total population of the crowd. Like you're expecting 50 people. A reasonable guest will probably have somewhere between 2 to 3 drinks total, or maybe 4, and then kind of go backwards from there. Like, okay, these are the 4 drinks that I'm offering. I imagine this is going to be my product mix, and then kind of tailor it down that way. But by no means is it scientific at all.
Right. And I'm pretty sure there's a science. I mean, again, it all depends on how many people, because you can take 100 people, right? 100 guests, and it could be a light drinking crowd. And then the next thing you know, you go there. And sometimes one of the things that the challenge is when you go there and say, oh yeah, it's a light drinking crowd. You go there and then Uncle Tom is pounding drinks after drinks, and like, whoa. And there's a few Uncle Toms out there, Uncle Joe that's invited to the party. And you're like, wait a minute, you told me it was a light drinking crowd, and these guys, and so
it's going to town.
Right. So whenever you're really low on ice, or those bottles are already gone after 2-3 hours, you're like, well, what happened here? So you have your cousin Sandy riding out to the liquor store to getting some emergency liquor.
That's awesome.
It happens all the time. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but again, you just never know. It goes back. And it just comes with practice. After a while, you kind of get your cadence and kind of get a vibe of how much to buy.
Right. So a lot of the other questions can be around, or are around legal stuff. So we're talking licensing, we're talking corporate structure and stuff like that. Do you have any advice as far as like, I'm a bartender, I want to build a private event, mobile bartending business. What would be your first steps? What would kind of be the direction that you would go with that?
Yeah, if you're looking to build a mobile bartending business and looking for bigger events, definitely like a catering liquor license is what you need to look into. And I believe different states are different when it comes to those laws, but those licenses. But yeah, you definitely want to look into that. And then, of course, sometimes big wedding venues, I know here in Texas, they want the bartending company to have some form of insurance for liability. So especially when you work like a big corporate events. So that's something that could be also pricey, and you have to kind of cost that in. So anyway, so that's pretty much it. If you're just like a freelance bartender, I know here in Texas, all you need is your TABC license. That's basically, you just have your license to serve liquor. Okay. So again, every state is different. I'm looking into it now, especially with the research with the book, figuring out different state laws as it pertains to, serving and selling liquor. But yeah, look into it because here in Texas, it's pretty pricey as far as selling it. But yeah, if you want to get into the bigger events, you definitely got to acquire some form of catering, alcohol catering license. Right.
And the insurance part, I think, is really important for people to understand, because a lot of people can kind of get into the industry on a whim. Because we talked about no barrier to entry if you just go through Craigslist. But the thing that you really have to consider is your liability. If somebody gets in an accident and you overserve them, or if you serve them, they're going to come asking questions to you. So, there's a lot of risk involved with selling alcohol or, services like this. So you definitely want to consult your local laws. Hopefully in the future, we'll talk to a beverage lawyer, someone that specializes in spirits and alcohol, and hopefully they can kind of give us a general rule of thumb to follow. But it really is critical to kind of protect yourself and your business from basically loss.
Right. Yeah.
Now with when you start to do this a little bit more frequently, is there any pieces of equipment that you highly recommend people just start investing in, getting some good products for yourself?
Yeah, so you definitely want to get the basic bartending kit. You can get that at Top shelf supply. Get that right there. You definitely want your shaker tin. You want your strainer.
Right.
You want your wine and bottle opener. Bar mats. Again, private event, it's a little different. You want to get stuff like a cooler, like a small to medium sized cooler, an ice scoop.
Right.
One of the most underrated tools in private event bartending is actually an ice pick. Believe it or not, Chris.
Really?
Well, because you're dealing with a lot of chunky ice, and the ice isn't the greatest, as especially when it comes to these big old blocks, and you just pound it. And if you just throw them in the cooler, that ice pick, man, is just heaven sent. You're just like pop, pop. So you definitely want to invest in that. Of course, a cutting board, a good knife. Those are some essentials that you definitely want to get. A garnish tray. So those are kind of the basic stuff that you need to get. So there is definitely an investment when it comes to equipment, but you can get it, of course, on Amazon again, Top Shelf Supply.
And basically, it's just kind of like all the things that you would have at your disposal if you were working behind a bar. You're probably going to want an equivalent of that if you're private bartending. So, those are definitely handy. I know one of the things that is really helped me out with doing large events for some spirit companies and stuff is just containers, large format containers, like Cambros, where you can mix big batches of stuff and then decant them out. That was a pretty big one.
In handy, right?
yeah, absolutely. And cooler on wheels. You got to get a cooler on wheels.
Right.
We're not all as big and hefty and strong like you, man.
No, man. What are you talking about? It's funny because one of the things, I was actually working a wedding not too long ago, and the client brought these big old Yeti coolers. I mean, massive, and they were just, loaded up with beer.
Right.
And he looked at me, he's like, all right, so we're going to be over here partying and you're going to set up, right? I'm like, yeah, sure. So he just walked off, and I was like, oh, where's the dolly at, man? I can't carry this. And so, yeah, man, I think some wedding venues, luckily they had a dolly, so I was able to do that to pick it up. But yeah, it could be, that's one thing about private event bartending, Chris, as you know, you've done a few before. It could be, there's some labor to it. Pulling those coolers could be heavy. So you definitely invest in a cooler with wheels for sure.
Right. And this is something that I noticed a couple of years ago is like, you don't know what you're going to walk into. I mean, you literally have no idea unless you talk to the client, you actually walk the place, you get a general understanding of what's going on. So my mentality was just prepare for the worst.
Yep.
I mean, if a lot of the time you don't even have running water. So, you got to kind of figure out different workarounds and what's going to happen if you run out of ice or different possibilities and stuff like that. So, I always had a lot more equipment than I probably needed, but that's with a cooler on wheels helped out.
Yeah, no, you need that. And actually, I was looking at your questions. You were talking about how some of the biggest mistakes to avoid, and that is one of them is to, when you go there, you have to be prepared for anything. There's been situations where one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and I tell people getting into the business, is if they're telling you beer and wine, bring your shaker tin, be prepared for anything, because they can switch it. Next thing you know it, they're bringing liquor, and you need to shake a few cocktails. And you have to be ready to go. I remember making the mistake of not bringing, beer and wine. Okay, cool. Let me just leave all my other stuff there. It's cool. I'm going to keep it lightweight. And next thing you know, they're bringing like mixes and they were like, we want margaritas and we want mojitos. And I'm like, oh, snaps. I left my muddler at home. And and I'm like, going to the catering. Can I have something where I could, it could be, it's happened. It's happened a couple times. So yes, that's a big mistake there. So be prepared for everything and anything.
Because, man, you're giving me like PTSD here. I'm remembering so many times where I walk into a place, we're like, hey, you know what? We changed. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do this thing. And you're just like, what?
What? Yeah.
Are you serious? You're like, we only need half the amount of ice. Are you sure?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So it really is just, you got to keep your head on a swivel and you got to really be prepared for anything.
Yeah,
you're going to get that email maybe an hour beforehand. Like, hey, by the way, would you mind stopping off and picking up vodkas? And like, oh man.
Been through those before. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see what else here. So once you get your business up and running, you get all your licensing, you get all the things that you need to be up to code, basically. What are some ways to kind of build your business? You got your first kind of couple clients. You want to go full time on this. How do you make that next step?
Social media is huge. I think, especially if you're a bartender, Instagram has been kind of the go-to social media platform. So
Right.
Instagram, using Facebook, getting in different Facebook group communities. And I always challenge bartenders who are jumping into this industry is, go to networking events, go to these little meetups and events that are not within your industry, real estate events and business events, and get involved with that and find out, and, open house, weddings, wedding venues rather. There's a lot that, going on in the city. So go out there and network. Social media has been huge on Instagram, using the hashtags. And that's where you do it. I mean, just as long as you kind of share what you do, and also leveraging video, like if you can just post videos of you kind of bartending, that also catches attention. And again, I always tell people, one of the cool things about private event bartenders that bartending is that there's always birthday parties, there's always weddings, people are always getting married, there's different occasions. I mean, I did a funeral one time, and that was interesting. Yeah. They had like a wake, and they were apparently the person who passed away was a big party animal and loved like whiskey. And they did. It was a really awkward because it was weird. I was like, wait a minute, how am I supposed to feel? Is that? I mean, what's going on here? So that's my. Anyways, but people were having a great time. And so again, my whole point being is that there's an event for anything and everything. So that's something that you see. So even recording all those events and you bartending also helps out in kind of promoting what you do.
Sure, so, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really what helped me when it came to kind of building on my clientele.
Perfect. Now, you touched on something earlier I want to kind of circle back with, because I almost lost this one, but you're in the middle of writing a book, right? About private event bartending?
Right. The book is called Side Hustle Bartending, How to Turn Pours into Profit as a Private Event Bartender is the title. So I'm very excited. It's been in the cooker for quite some time, but I'm looking forward to kind of releasing it and helping people. I think it's a side hustle that got me out of debt. It's a side hustle that it's a fun side hustle. And I think, it's one of those, it's a great transition for bartenders that are burned out from the industry, that want to transition and get home at a reasonable time and spend time with their family. So it does give you a lot of flexibility, freedom. Gives you some good profit, some good money. So there's a lot of benefits in becoming a private event bartender. So I wanted to put this book out there because there's a lot of people that are looking for that side hustle. And if you like bartending, and if you like or ever wanted to be a bartender and you want to make some good money, this is something that I want to be able to help people step by step how to do it. And do it right.
Yeah. And those first couple are definitely hard. You learn real quick. So having somebody that has already done that and kind of shares their experience is definitely worth the time and the energy to read that book. For sure. So we'll definitely put that in the show notes and link to that. Now, I think there were a couple other ones. When you talk to clients, what's the difference between you buying booze and the client providing booze? Because I know that's kind of a common question that a lot of clients might have, right? Like who provides the booze, and is there a distinction? Is there like a legal thing that only the customer can provide booze?
Yeah, it varies, Chris. I know here in Texas, you need a license to purchase and then sell. So a lot of the times here, if it's a mobile bartending company with alcohol catering license, that's what we call it here, they can actually purchase it and sell it from the distributor. But in our case, if you're just a freelance bartender, often we have to just say, hey, listen, you purchased the liquor. We're going to give you the amount of liquor to purchase. We'll ask them questions as far as, do you want signature cocktails? You want a margarita? Well, you need this. And we kind of help them out as far as facilitating and what to buy and how much to buy. So it all depends. Again, every state is different when it comes to the purchasing of the liquor and selling, but a lot of the times they're cool with it. I mean, as long as you help them out, they're fine with you picking up or you helping them with the consulting, and then they pick up the liquor and then they just drop it off and you're ready to go.
Okay,
So
perfect.
again, it all depends on the state law.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So other than bartending, let's say you started your company once again, up and running, you're doing a great job marketing, and you got all your licensing. What other skills are super critical for this type of bartending?
The one that sticks out, Chris, is customer service, brother.
Yeah.
When it comes to private event bartending, customer service, I mean, your game has to be up. And I mean, that is the thing that you have to keep in mind, that when you're in this business, it's just people are coming up to you because they want to feel good. And they want to make sure that, you know, they're having a great cocktail, but more importantly, they want to make sure that the bartender is giving them great guest service. There's, 9 times out of 10, there's usually everybody's at the bar hanging out, and they want to make sure that they're hanging out with the bartender. So that's something that you want to make sure you deliver. So a few little tips that I do. So I'll even get to know them by name, and I'll say, hey, what's going on, Chris? So you ready for another one? Yeah, great. And I don't even say anything, man. I just go ahead and make their drink. So I memorize their cocktails, and what that does is just tips, man. That's just a great way to kind of, fill up that tip jar, because they appreciate that. Oh, man, you remember that cocktail. That's awesome, man. Thank you. Oh, and again, if you just mention my name, hey, Michelle, what's going on? Hey, how you? So again, building that rapport, that customer service. A lot of the times when I train private event bartenders that are getting into the business, they don't have that social, the guest service personality. And that's something you can coach. But I tell people, you got to love people first. And it goes. I mean, it's kind of the golden rule for any bartender, right? I mean, hospitality, we're in the hospitality business, but it really is amplified on a different level when it comes to private event bartending. If you have that skill set, and if you don't, you have to cultivate that and get comfortable with that. But I mean, it really, really results in some great tips. And of course, making people feel great at the party. So that's one thing that I definitely want to make sure that I spearhead, is just when you get into the business, customer service is where it's at.
Yeah, and that's really refreshing to hear, because I know there's been a couple of parties that I've gone to in the past where they've had private event bartending bartenders there, and there almost seems to be this kind of disengagement. Yeah. Like you're here, like the bartender almost has this assumption the only reason you're here is for a drink, and I'm just going to deliver that drink and you're going to walk away. So there's no real engagement. But I imagine that extra level of customer service and really kind of being there in that moment probably helps to drive long-term business too. Yes. Because referrals and, who was that bartender you had at that party? He was great.
I get it all the time, man.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's really where it goes. There's been times where wedding venues say, hey, listen, so-and-so was, remember that, that wedding that you did? Well, one of their cousins was inquiring about you, and here's their number. Can you call them up? It happens a lot. And as a matter of fact, there was a point actually like 2-3 years ago where I kind of stopped the marketing side, because it was just all through referrals, and I was staying busy. I mean, I was getting, 4 to 5, gigs, 6 gigs a month.
Wow.
Where I was booked, where the other mobile bartending companies were asking me, hey, can you work this event? And I was already booked because I was doing a client's cousin, a wedding or whatnot. So yeah, definitely that customer service definitely results not only in tips, but also getting referrals. That word of mouth is key. And again, guest service, man, that's where it's at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I just remember a similar situation with someone's DJ, at a wedding. They killed it. It was, and we asked them, who'd you have? And, it was a great turnout and a great DJ at our wedding as a result. So what are some of the best / worst practices for mobile bartending in general? I know we talked about customer service is one of the best practices, and we just kind of covered that. But anything else that you'd recommend?
One of them is that stands out, Chris. And there's a few in the book that I jotted down that I have in there, but one of them that stands out is just showing appreciation, brother. And this is a bartender. I think a lot of bartenders slip on. And again, I'm all about hospitality, man. So one of the things that I've seen in the private event, because they do feel like, hey, listen, I'm here to serve you a cocktail. Go ahead and here's a cocktail and go. Showing appreciation for the tips. Some people, when they get tipped, they don't acknowledge it. And that kind of, that bugs me, man. So I always tell people when I'm training them, say, hey, listen, you know what's going on. You're aware of it. So make sure that you show appreciation. So that, to me, if there's like a best practice for any private event bartender, is to make sure that you acknowledge every tip that you get. And again, it results in more tips. So,
Sure.
And a lot of private bartenders neglect that side when it comes to appreciating tips and acknowledging people. Always looking up when you're icing down a cocktail, making sure that you're always looking at people, making contact, and you're quite aware. I mean, same principle, same skill sets that you need at the bar, but you really, really need to be on your P's and Q's when it comes to private event bartending because there's a lot going on. So you still have to kind of control your mothership, right? So yeah, I mean, that's one of the things, but showing appreciation is one of the things that I always tell private event bartenders to make sure that they're aware of, for sure. And as far as like one of the biggest mistakes, I think you asked about one of the things.
Just kind of some things to avoid.
Okay, here's a big one, Chris, is just, it's open bar. You have to be very, very careful with over serving. And you know what? That's like the number one problem in the private event bartending industry is over pouring.
Yeah.
A lot of the times, and it's so easy because it's happening so fast. And then, going back to Uncle Joe, he's had 2 drinks and next thing you know it, he wants a shot. And some wedding venues have different, rules when it comes to if you can take a shot or not. But those can slip by. They're having a good time and you don't know. And there's a lot of, you use the 1.75, those big old bottles, and sometimes they don't have pours. So you're kind of free pouring. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of challenges that a lot of bartenders have to be careful because it's so easy to over pour. They're having a great time. You want to make sure they're having a good time and having their cocktail. So it's easy to kind of fall into that trap. So yeah, man, you got to be careful because that's been a big issue in the private event. It's been challenging for sure.
Man, I bet there's going to be some great stories out of this book.
Oh man. Yes. I mean, it's one of those things where I did a wedding a couple weeks ago, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And, what happened was I actually cut somebody off, which was something that I don't like to do. Nobody nobody likes to do that, but I had to cut somebody off. It was within the second hour. Ooh. And yeah, so, but they were like, they were asking for doubles or whatnot, but they had a few drinks and they just, and I wasn't over pouring. It was just, cause I was making sure, but they were coming back and then their cousin came back and then was giving them drinks and then they got drunk and they were still, so I had to cut like 2 or 3, like the whole table was cut off. And so, yeah, because of that. So again, you just have to be so careful, man, because you really don't know. And this person, when they came up to the bar, they were cohesive. They were still kind of like, they're, hey, what's going on? And you couldn't tell if they were drunk or not. But next thing you know, they walk off the bar and then just boom, just fall. I'm like, oh Lord.
Oh,
so
no.
you got to be careful because sometimes you can't read everybody, and that's a skill that you cultivate with time. So yeah, I mean, I have plenty of stories, but those are the things that you have to be careful. And it's a major liability because if they get hurt, if they drive home.
Right.
And they lie to you, right? You say, hey, listen, I'll pull them aside sometimes if they had too much to drink. And I'm like, hey, listen, I just want to make sure that I take care of you. Right. Everything, how's your ride situation? Oh, no, I'm going to Uber. And the next thing you know, they come back.
Right.
And then they don't have an Uber. They're actually driving.
Yeah.
So again, you're dealing with a lot of challenges because you're getting, people that want to drink and kind of quench their thirst. And then they know that you may cut them off. But it's just one of those things that you have to deal with as a private event bartender, man. It's tough. Did you ever deal with that?
Not really. Not the private event stuff. No? I mean, behind the bar, obviously. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But private event stuff, I think my biggest concern when I was doing private events was underage drinking. I think that's,
Oh, yes.
You go to weddings, you go to, all these events that, there's young kids running around. Mm-hmm. Then how do you control that? Because, I mean, I remember when, my cousins were little and going to a couple other weddings, you see that 10-year-old running around the corner with a wine glass in his hand, just taking it straight to the head. You're like, whoa, and we've all seen those videos, kids falling down. So I think that's always one of the most things I'm kind of really try to be conscious of. But at the end of the day, it's kind of outside of your control. that booze has kind of left your bar.
Right. It gets tricky. I've seen them where they just pass it, hey, listen, or I've actually rejected somebody because they were underage.
Right.
And next thing you know, with their cousin's coming by and grabs a drink. So they may have 2 drinks and they're taking it. I'm just eyeing them and they're passing it on. So you have to deal with that. And what I do, unfortunately, you just have to go there and say, hey, listen, I'm taking this cocktail and you're cut off. You're done.
Right.
You can't do that. Right. So, those are the things that, you don't want to get involved with, but it happens in the private event bartending a lot.
Right.
One of the things that gets me, Chris, is when you do these weddings, people will come up to the bar and they look underage and they get surprised that you're carding them.
Right.
And, and they're like, hey, listen, you're going to card me. And a lot of people come into the wedding or these venues because there's special events that they don't need to bring their ID. You're like,
right.
I'm serving you liquor. Like, really? You're going to card me? I'm like, yes, you look underage and you're about to have this cocktail. And in this state, we have to card you. That's the law. But yeah, I think it's funny whenever people go to these private events. So if you're, if you guys are the listeners and the viewers, if you're getting into private event bartending, you definitely have to ID. It's super, super strict and they will kind of look at you dumbfounded whenever you ID them and thinking that it's a private event and they don't need to show ID. So that always gets me.
Now, do you ever have challenges with the host, like kind of pushing it and say, no, it's fine?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? That's got to be a super sensitive area.
It is. And it's like, ma'am, you explain to them, I know this is family. It's a private event. However, and this is what you do, Chris, you let them know I can lose my license.
Right.
If I serve them. And number one, it's by law. They need to have their ID, right. And I can lose my license. Usually when you do that, it kind of alleviates and okay, they don't want you to lose a job, obviously. So once you do that, they'll kind of back off. I think I've had one incident out of all the years of private event bartending where the host was really got upset about not serving this particular person who was underage liquor. So it happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but you just kind of have to let them know, hey, listen, this is the law. And a lot of the weddings, they'll have actually cops here. I'm not sure how it is over there in California, but we do have officers there. So that helps out a lot.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of the times you just have to let them know, listen, this is law. I can lose my license and there's no way that I'm going to lose my license and go to jail for this, for some.
Absolutely.
So,
I remember another question that came up in the group, and that was around kind of aligning with a customer in the beginning of your kind of, interview session, and how to tell people I don't do that. Like basically, like the customer wants X, Y, Z.
Okay. You
don't do Z. How do you tell them that's not something I do and still having a good relationship with them? So for instance, let's say I want you to come up with 5 cocktails and I want one of them to be, tequila or something like that. And this is a terrible example. Or tepache. I want you to make tepache from scratch, which is a fermented pineapple beverage. And you don't do that. How do you kind of like gracefully say no, but still kind of make them happy and kind of get the job essentially?
Right. And that's happened before. I'm just transparent with them, Chris. I let them know, respectfully. I'm super transparent. I have a selection here that was, provided by the client, and these are the mixers and these are the cocktails. And I'm sorry, I wish I could do that. Is there something else I can make you? I have these spirits, and then that's when we kind of get creative and see if you can come up with something. But yeah, I just get very transparent with it, and usually they're cool with it. It happens a lot.
Right.
Hey, can I have a mojito or can I have an old fashioned? And by the way, that's another tip too. When you're like getting in the private event bartending, I highly recommend getting like the basic, like, the bitters and getting some simple syrup. I'll bring Bloody Mary mix. So a lot of the bases will be, the whiskey and vodka you'll see a lot at weddings. So bring the extras to be able to provide that. That's another lesson that I learned the hard way when there was a great party and people were asking for old fashions, and it's a simple cocktail to make. Well, I had all that stuff at home, but I forgot to bring it.
Right.
So, the person was upset. I was like, man, I should have brought it. So now I bring everything, all the extras, to make some of these cocktails that I could make that are, 2, 3, 3 ingredient cocktails.
Sure.
So, just being transparent with them and then suggesting something that you can provide them that usually kind of makes them happy at the end.
Awesome. Very cool. So other than that, man, any other advice for kind of people kind of thinking about getting into the mobile bartending business, or anything, words of wisdom from your experience for anyone?
Words of wisdom, man. Just try it out. If you're a bartender and you want to make some good money on the side, it's a great way to really make some good money and just do something a little different outside of your industry. And of course, if anyone who is ever been curious about bartending, private event bartending is a great entry level to bartending.
Right.
Because a lot of the times it's just basic cocktails, drinks, and I made a list, and I'll be sharing that with your listeners, 20 cocktails. But a lot of the times it's usually like less than 10 cocktails that you have to memorize, and 2-ingredient cocktails. And It's usually the same stuff. You really don't have to bring in, the mixology aspect of it to a lot of these private events unless they're signature cocktails. But for the most part, like 98% of the events that you will be doing are very simple. So if you ever wanted to scratch that bartending itch, private event bartending is a great way to kind of get in, to feel like a bartender, to learn the drinks, to get in front of people, to make money. So I highly recommend it. And again, it's great money, great meeting people, and there's just a lot of great benefits to it. So again, it's been a big game changer in my world, and how it's helped me expand my network and also again get out of debt. So that's what I want to do with this, Chris, is kind of build up and help people embrace bartending as a side hustle in the private event bartending. I think it's a great way to do it, and here I am, and I'm doing it for side hustle bartending, baby.
There it is. Cool. Now, if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's going to be the best way? Do you have a social media platform that you prefer? Email address, Facebook? How do people get a hold of you?
Right. So if you're interested in the book is not out. It's actually in the final stages. So if you're interested in the book, go to mbabartending.com/ebook and join the waiting list. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be releasing chapter 1 for free. So if you join the list today, you will have access to chapter 1 in a couple of weeks when it's released. So yeah, definitely sign up to mbabartending.com/ebook and MBA Bartending on Instagram and on Facebook. And I'm going through some rebranding on those 2 social media platforms. So bear with me, guys. We're going to have a new logo, new look. And, but yeah, definitely the ebook, which I'm really excited. It's going to it's going to be a very how-to, simple 50-page ebook on how to start, become a side hustle bartender, a private event bartender from A to Z. So I'm really, really excited about that.
Man, I love it. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ozeal, for your time, man, and your expertise. Definitely appreciate it. And we'll definitely talk to you in the future, and can't wait for the book.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, Chris. Cheers.
Cool. So thanks again to Ozeal for spending so much time with us and answering so many of our questions. I feel like it was just kind of like lightning round with how many questions we asked him, but he offered such great advice. And if anybody's interested in private event bartending, definitely check out his book. We'll have a link to the website in our show notes, as well as his social media contact. So yeah, check out the show notes over at mixologytalk.com/139. Now, if you're just getting into private event bartending, it's kind of like a side gig, and you need bar tools, we got you covered. You definitely want to check out our sister company, Top Shelf Bar Supplies. You can find them on Amazon, and we offer a whole lineup of bar tools that you can outfit your private event bartending gig. We'll have some more podcasts for you guys in the future, but until then, cheers everyone.